Look, let's be very clear. This isn't about Hunter Biden's white privilege. It's about Hunter Biden's Democrat privilege. Because Donald Trump Jr. showed up for 5 congressional subpoenas. There was never this circus where he was subpoenaed by House Democrats and he showed up on the Senate side or showed up at the White House to answer in some fake, phony, lame press conference, not actually going to the House and doing what he was compelled by a subpoena to do. Hunter Biden did that. And then he has the unmitigated gall to show up here when we know that we're going through actually the legislation for contempt, with, by the way, Mr. Chairman, we should actually get to the legislation of contempt. The speechifying is great, but let's do our business, members. He has the gall to come here, show up, and then when the Democrats are saying, hey, he wants to speak, he leaves. This is a joke. This is a farce. The man has been subpoenaed by Congress. Oh, and by the way, the January 6th committee, Mr. Raskin, which you did sit on, by the way, that was not a normally ordered committee of Congress because Nancy Pelosi did not want the Republican members that then Leader McCarthy put up.
According to the courts, it was.
My time, sir.
Will you yield for
a
correction?
I was respectful of your time. I didn't say anything. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's move forward with our business. He should be held in contempt. There was a subpoena. He did not answer it. Any other American will be held in contempt by Congress. Any other. This is Democrat privilege of the highest order. Let's do our jobs. I yield.
Gentleman yields. Chair now recognizes Ms. Ocasio-Cortez from New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to address briefly, quickly, that moment about privilege and all of this that we're seeing here. It was a very beautiful speech by the gentlelady, who, as she mentioned, was helped lead on the now majority side, the Civil Rights and Civil Liberties Subcommittee. But I think it's so exemplary of the point that she also oversaw the elimination of the Civil Rights Subcommittee on this committee, which really kind of gives the whole game away. We show up, we give speeches, we give flowery words, but at the end of the day, participate in the structural erosion of the rights and representation of people that are marginalized, women, people of color, people that just need to see their due process and civil liberties protected in this country. But I will move on. As also the Republican side had mentioned in their many raisings of the January 6th committee, that it's not just Hunter Biden, you, me, any individual subject to equal treatment under the law, to be held up to accountability under the law, but it is also these committees and this committee that is subject to oversight and law. We must comply with the law here as well. Now, I may be one of the very few people that actually believes in Congress, in this country. But I do, and many of us do here. And we have an obligation to engage in good faith participation to execute and comply with a subpoena. The chairman said in front of the country several times to Hunter Biden, you can show up here in front of the world, in front of the public. Hunter Biden took him up on that offer. He said, I will show up in public. I will show up in public. He showed up here today. He showed up here in the past. And Mr. Chairman, I know you do your best with what you've got, but you've got members here that have submitted falsified evidence to the record. You have members here that have submitted and mischaracterized closed-door hearings, and people want to say back and forth at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what party it's happened from. You've got members who've engaged in revenge porn in this committee. So it is understandable why Hunter Biden would want to testify in front of the public for the American people to be able to witness that testimony for themselves. You've got members who've defied subpoenas. You've got members who we are 1 year into the term asking what the rules are at the beginning of the committee. The book was given to us on day one. And so what we should do is allow the man to testify. I believe in the power of the Oversight Committee. Frankly, I believe in it regardless of whether Republicans or Democrats have the chair, because I believe that this committee should have the power of oversight. And we cannot do that on a partisan basis. And so for that, I implore this committee to allow Hunter Biden to testify publicly. I implore and I ask for that to happen. And we cannot do that by getting engaged in this back and forth on a defiance of a subpoena. Let him comply. Let him do it today. Let him do it tomorrow. but let the man do it. And with that, I yield back to the ranking member.
Congress passed the law 90 years ago, and ATF is catching
So you're
up
saying to me that a
technology.
law that Congress passed 90 years ago allows for 10 million Americans to become felons today?
Congress passing a law allows ATF to regulate as technology changes.
Come on, Mr. Wilcox, don't do that to the American people. We know better. Don't do that.
Chair recognizes Mr. Donalds for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quick, I find it interesting that my colleagues have no problem with the ATF going outside its boundaries with respect to this brace. Meanwhile, my colleagues have no issue with the fact that the President of the United States has made a complete bastardization of asylum at the southern border, which has led to more fentanyl killing more people between the ages of 18 and 45 in the United States. Fentanyl is the #1 killer of Americans in the United States. And they have no problem talking about that. They don't even want to discuss it. But we're here talking about this. Ms. Swearer, you just saw the video that was up on the screen. Do you have a response for this video?
Yes, though I suppose Mr. Bosco does as well. I think it's being used in a way to misconstrue the reality of SBRs. Like SBRs are actually still used by plenty of Americans who do have disabilities, but also just from the standpoint of SBRs themselves, they were the loophole, an attempt to regulate a loophole while trying to essentially ban handguns. Their restriction under the NFA has always been irrational. This idea that somehow a 14.5-inch barrel is more concealable than a 16.5-inch barrel when you walk in to commit a mass shooting, and that's why they choose it. It's just not realistic. It's the same gun. If you take that same gun and put it in a 16-inch barrel, if anything, the muzzle velocity will be increased when it is fired. So it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I'm sure Mr. Bosco has some thoughts on that as well.
I mean, Mr. Bosco, you're the inventor. What do you think?
Yeah, thanks. You know, I think there's a lot of people online, and we've seen some of those videos. The reason I invented the brace was for people with limited mobility. Well, that was the inception. That was why I made it. It was for a friend. Yes, there are people that are not using my product the way that I've designed it to be used, but the intent has always been that. The idea that by adding a brace to a pistol makes the firearm more concealable and therefore more dangerous is laughable. It's a piece of plastic. It weighs a certain amount. It makes the firearm longer. It's not making the firearm more concealable. It's making it less concealable.
Mr. Bosco, let me ask you a question. How many Americans do you think will become felons as a result of this rule?
Well, I think we should probably look at what Congressional Research Services did. They came up with a study that said anywhere between 10 and 40 million Americans own arm braces at this moment. If we use the smallest number that they have, which is 10 million, you will have an effect that come, I believe it's May 16th, which is the deadline. If someone wasn't smart enough to look up the Federal Register, who didn't know about this rule, from one day to the next, he will be in possession of an unregistered short-barreled rifle, and he will be committing a crime which is punishable of up to 10 years in prison. It's a felony offense, $250,000 fine.
So in order to avoid this, the American would have to spend $200, get their fingerprints taken, get a photo of them given to the ATF. Am I correct in that?
So the agency, even with this, has flip-flopped back and forth. Originally, they were suggesting that Americans pay $200.
And Mr. Bosco, not to totally cut you off, let me ask you this question real quick. Did Congress pass a law to stipulate the ATF do this?
Unequivocally, no.
Mr. Wilcox, how you doing? Fellow Brooklynite over here. Grew up the same time. Let me ask you this question. Do you think it's okay for the ATF to act outside of congressional legislative authority, criminalizing 10 million Americans who are currently law-abiding citizens?
It's good to see another proud son of Brooklyn. I don't believe that is what ATF is doing here, so I disagree with the premise.
Do you think that by this rule, there will not be 10 million felons in the United States because they bought a product that the ATF authorized to be sold and that the ATF said was legal up until the Biden administration?
So, not liking a law isn't a reason for ATF not to.
Well, Mr. Wilcox, there's no law. Congress didn't pass it. That's a rule from ATF. Let me ask you this question. Do you believe in separation of powers?
Of course,
Do you believe that the legislative power resides within the congressional body and not the executive?
I do.
So then why do you think it's okay for the ATF to come up with some rule with the force of law that Congress did not pass?
Congress passed the law 90 years ago, and ATF is.
So you're saying to me that a law that Congress passed 90 years ago allows for 10 million Americans to become felons today?
Congress passing a law allows ATF to regulate as technology changes.
Come on, Mr. Wilcox, don't do that to the American people. We know better. Don't do that. I yield.
Thôi anh hãy đi về vĩnh biệt kể từ đây. Còn luyến lưu làm chi, còn vấn vương làm gì? Ai thật lòng yêu ai đến bây giờ mình đã biết. Chuyện tình đôi ta anh hãy xem là huyền thoại. Anh đừng giận em, kìa dĩ vãng mùa thương vẫn đẹp như giấc mơ. Trên trời bao ánh sao tình ta bấy nhiêu kỷ niệm. Nào ngờ hôm nay định mệnh chia rẽ đôi ta, em biết làm sao hơn. Mùi tóc làn môi vã thư tình, em xin gửi lại anh. Với tất cả cuộc vui em cũng xin trả lại anh. Dù mãi em theo chồng, đời đời em vẫn nhớ mãi mối tình đầu tiên. Thôi anh hãy đi về, khóc chỉ làm buồn thêm. Trời đã khuya từ lâu, càng vắng đêm tà tư. Mai này thuyền hoa vui đón em về cùng bên khác. Đường tình đôi ta hai hướng đi buồn thật buồn. Anh hiểu dùm em, nào ước muốn giàu sang bởi tình duyên trái ngang. Em vì chữ hiếu nên đành câm nín cho đẹp lòng. Chuyện tình đôi ta nghẹn ngào trong đắng muôn cay, cõi vĩnh biệt thiên thu. chữ hiếu nên đành câm nín cho đẹp lòng. Chuyện tình đôi ta nghẹn ngào trong đau